conversation. Tell us about the mindset that really helps go from being a perfectionist and being somewhat against myself to being for me.
Yeah, that is a never-ending process. And I think over 4 years, if I can at least help the kids with that and have them develop that skill, but that is certainly not easy, to know that they're good enough, no matter what it is. You're good enough. It's just waking up and doing the right things and being a good person and treating people the right way makes you good enough. That is it, period. But that's really, really hard. And I think some of this too is just, and I keep going back to this, but I see it more and more, especially with social media. What they hear externally is so different, and it just continues to feed that internal brain that's saying, I'm not fast enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not good enough, I'll never be as pretty as that person. It's just constant. And then the brain, as we know the way the brain works, the brain looks for more affirmation, and then it finds more affirmation in places that wouldn't even be there. And so I haven't figured out how to break that cycle, but I sure spend a lot of time promoting you are good enough.
Yeah. Well, Carlette, I think the funny thing is I never even thought about a difference. Growing up in rural New Zealand, small town, I didn't know there was a difference, and I didn't know there were barriers for male and females. I was really lucky to have some strong female role models in my life. And really, it was only when I started coaching myself and went into the cities that I saw these barriers, because suddenly it was pointed out that, women prefer men coaches. Now, I don't know, I was told that in an interview. And so that was the first time I struck anything like that. And it blew me away. And I thought, I'm not sure how having male anatomy is any different to the jobs that we're going to be doing. But I guess what I've seen over time is that our expectations of men and women is so different. And it's part of society's upbringing. And there is a difference. I'm probably going to generalize here, but females like connection. Females like to connect before you correct them. So a male coach can come in and demand something different. And because females, again, generally like to please, they'll do what a male asks. If a female comes in, there's an expectation that they should nurture, they should know me, they should understand me. So what I've learned is actually there's lots of females that actually that's really, really important before they're going to learn from you. So I guess I was someone that was ultra competitive. And again, that's probably not lots of females. So when I go to training, the first thing I do is get stuck in, grab the ball. I want to get going and make use of the time. What I found is my teammates were all standing around wanting to chat and connect. And so that's a big difference for me. I've learned that actually, just because as a player I look this way, I have to actually adapt. And I was probably more unique than the common denominator.
So with the athletes, we meet individually once every 2 weeks. And in those meetings, I meet with them individually. We usually do it somewhere on campus, not in my office, because I find that creates a dynamic. The office dynamic can be a little intimidating and feel very work driven. And so I try to meet somewhere on campus with our athletes once every 2 weeks. We talk non-volleyball, but often it goes back to volleyball because that is what we are doing together. And I would say, Kathy, that's when most of these sort of conversations come up. And they come up in, okay, what are you struggling with, right? That's usually where it starts. And then how are you feeling about it? And then why do we feel that way? Or what is making us feel that way? I feel like those are the conversations where it pops its head out, right? Well, I felt this way about the tone you used when you said this to me. Or, I feel like when, you turn away from me in this way, that you're dismissing me, or things like that. But I try to open up as much dialogue and conversation about how we're feeling about our training, about our competition, in our match, in all the places, so that we can talk about it directly. Because I think the hard part, well, for me anyway, it's not hard to talk about it. It's hard to bring it up or to have it come up. Because so many of our athletes don't have the skills yet to communicate in a way where they can even identify what they're feeling and articulate it, let alone say, I think, as a woman, I mean, they're never going to say, as a woman, I wouldn't expect you to talk to me like that. But I feel
any more than you would have at that age. All you knew is you wanted to play for a guy. You didn't even know why.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they're where you were.
Exactly. And so I just try to expose it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that we do as volleyball, as coaches, in trying to make our teams better. Like, I want to expose where other teams are going to attack us, or where, we might be less than, physically. I want to expose that so we can be self-aware about what we're working on and what we're going into a competition with. And so that's what I talk to our athletes about, is we want to be self-aware of how we're feeling and where those feelings come from and why we might be feeling some kind of way, so that we can actually address it and not just ignore it and be told, no, you shouldn't feel some kind of way. And so that's no talk in our gym. We don't ever talk about should feel like this, should feel like that. We're going to feel what we're going to feel. And then from there, okay, like, what do we do with that? Like, how can we productively use that to become more self-aware, to be better people, to be better volleyball players, to be a better organization, to work together better?
I think beyond just our athletes, I think societally, I can just tell you my experience. If I were on my athletes the way that they were on me, then I'm abrasive, bitchy, and all these other things, right? And that still holds true today. I think men have license to say and do more. And I think it's unfortunate, but the reality is that's just a gender stereotype in our society, period. I think coaching, it sticks more and it stands out more, because no matter what you do as a female coaching in sport, they're going to compare you to the men.
So what about identity management? You've got the best players in the world and the best women who are competing on a team, and yet they are, human, and they are fiercely competitive. How do you notice that women manage their identity in a way that is really for other women and for themselves?
That's a good question. We were just talking about it this morning in a team meeting we had before training. And I guess the theme was that we really are, we will never be perfect at this, but our aspiration is to be a place where people can develop in a holistic manner. And when you say holistic, I guess that's just a fancy word for saying developing the whole person, and not just focusing on the techniques and tactics and craft of moving a volleyball around or manipulating it or getting it to do what you want, or a team to do what it wants with the ball. And so one of our players actually shared in here, or in the meeting, she said, for my first couple of years with this program, I don't think I felt like I had to do some things a little differently, because what worked in college, we all know, what gets you here doesn't necessarily keep you here in the USA gym. And just because, and everybody who was in college was the absolute dominator on her team. But you come in here and the whole gym is filled with dominators. It's kind of like the valedictorian who goes to Harvard. Well, everybody was a valedictorian, and now, and now not only do they play an instrument, they speak 3 languages, and they already are like state debate champion too. And it's very intimidating. And so people feel like they have to do things differently. And so this one member of our program said, yeah, I felt like I had to think more about volleyball, like live and breathe it, and look at video and overanalyze. And I just found myself spinning, and I was getting a little away from who I am as a person. Some people are going to be their best volleyball selves if they are nonstop thinking volleyball 24/7, looking at video for 2 hours a day, and just thinking, and always having it on their mind. But other people will be someone else might be her best volleyball self by giving herself a break for a few hours and thinking nothing about volleyball. In fact, this player who was sharing this and said, when I really started hitting my stride, I backed off on the 24/7 volleyball thing. So she mentioned a great friend on her team who was sitting in the room. She said, and yeah, when I go over to her house, she has a rule: no volleyball. We can't talk volleyball. And I love it because we need a break from that too. So there's this spectrum from 24/7. That's going to work for some people, but it's not going to work for others. And the other end of the spectrum is, I'm going to get in here and I'm going to do my work for 6 or 7 hours, but then I've got to give myself a break. I mentioned to them also that I think I became a much better volleyball player when after I got married and after my wife and I had children, because before that time, I tended to make the mistake of defining myself far more by what had happened in training that day or what had happened during that match that day. And that's a really tough way to stay even, because everybody's going to have tough practices and practices where nothing goes well, and matches where nothing's going to go well, and then matches where things and practices where they do go well. But it's really hard to be locked into that mode of riding your performance, the ups and downs, when you have a 3 or a 4-year-old, this little cutie who just doesn't have a clue what's going on the court and just says, Dad, can we go to the park? And that might have been right after a big win at a tournament or something like that. It's just awesome to get that perspective and pull me out of this single-mindedness of trying to be the best player I can be or the best coach I can be, and also have this perspective of I'm a husband and a dad, and I'm so much more, and not defining myself solely based on what I'm doing in volleyball. And so I shared that with the team too. But I think it's really important to try to find some balance and find the balance that works for you. There are some people in our program who are their best as volleyball players and as teammates when they're thinking about volleyball a lot, but that's going to burn other people out. Not everybody can do that, but also you got to give yourself a break and some grace. We talk about that a lot, giving ourselves some grace as we're trying to do new things and make mistakes when we're operating at the edge of our abilities and we're trying to learn and improve.
Had a fair mix of both men and women coaches, and gosh, across the board, I mean, it wasn't that there are any extremely significant issues other than the women coaches had all done it, you know, so there was that aspect to it. Whereas my men coaches, I loved, they were great, and I learned tons from them as well, but it was different. It wasn't, they didn't live it, and they hadn't gone through the same stuff. So it's there, you find yourself in moments where you kind of find yourself thinking like, yeah, it's easy to say, but like, have you done this? Have you?
Yeah. And
you kind of can't help yourself going there. Or at least I couldn't. But yeah, it's yeah, that relatability factor was just huge for me too. And I'm a relationship person. Like I really like, trust is huge for me. I want to build the trust before we kind of get into anything. And yeah, and just kind of knowing that is there, it's a safe environment, and that the feedback going back and forth is all with the right purpose and goal in mind and all that sort of stuff.
Just how women win, and that we can be all of those things, right? We can, and they're all strengths in some way, that we can make them into strengths as well. That, we can, we can cry, and that's fine. And it doesn't mean we're weak. It means that we're processing, and we move on, and we move forward, and, we get through those processes and come out better for them and stronger. Or we can have tough conversations, and it's not, personal, it's, and so we can have and do and be all of those things, and move forward in a way that is, from a place of strength and a place of compassion and all of those things. I think that's, how women win is just, that's part of it, right? Is that we in ourselves embrace all of that as strengths, and we embrace all that, and that we accept that of ourselves and accept that from others as well. I think that's right. And I think, sometimes we can be our own worst critics sometimes. And so I think, making sure that again, I've had many conversations and have met many other coaches that have gone through similar things, or are experiencing similar, just complications that, and that we understand, like, okay, let's like, we can manage it. And if we can't, or if we aren't, or we're not in a good space, then, we always have options. Maybe we've got other options to go in, other directions to go in as well.
The work that we did was like, what is my philosophy? What do I stand for? And I was, very compared to my mom, especially coming in, taking over the program. And I was so in awe with my mom, because she started coaching back in the mid 70s. This is before the NCAA, and, really just kind of learning along the way. And what she did was she'd ask questions of coaches that were successful. Go find a role model, and it may just be pieces of that person, but, learn along the way and ask a bunch of questions. And I think that's something that I've held true to myself, is that I'm vulnerable, and I'm open to, I want to learn or ask questions, but I'm also open to, I would say criticism, or critique would be the better word. Is one of my things in my program is I'm always like, how can we get better? What do you like? What do you not like? What was it? What was a 10 for you? What was a 2 for you? And, and I listen to my players and make changes as we need them. Because I'll tell them, I'm like, I've been doing this for a long time now, but I promise you, I don't know everything. And as times change, I think I have to change with them too. And so I think asking questions is one of the greatest things a coach can do. And it cannot be my way or the highway.
The reason I'm in collegiate volleyball is because I really enjoy being around the athletes and helping them grow. I think people talk to me all the time, like, what's the juice? I was out in Turkey hanging out with G.I.V.E.H.O.P.E, and him and I were on the same path when we were young. I spent a week out there, and he's going, Kevin, well, by the way, his staff has not one female on it. It's like 8 dudes and him. And so he's asking me, hey, Kevin, like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you here professional? My answer is pretty simple. I don't do it just for the volleyball. I do it to help young women grow and help have some influence on their lives, and hopefully help them on their path to being great human beings, great players, and all that kind of stuff. So
I can tell you this, it's never a given that you're going to be a champion or you're going to have a successful season. I don't ever take a day for granted. That we leave practice, I'm like, man, we got a lot to do. And I'm the worst critic out there, because I always think we're awful, as I know what it takes to be the best team in the country. And, I spend every day figuring out how can we get closer to that mark, both physically and mentally. But I learned this a few years ago, and I was talking to one of my hitters, and hitting is such an emotional game within the game. Your mentality as a hitter is every bit as important as the mechanics of your swing. And she was a really great hitter, but she was really up and down. And her best friend on the team was a local Chicago, and they were both from Chicagoland. And Her best friend wasn't quite as talented as her, but I was talking about what made Abby, the best friend, so consistent. And I said, she is so consistent emotionally. She is consistent every day. You never know whether she's having a good day or a bad day. You don't know if she's having a good at bat or a bad at bat. And I realized I was talking to every person who needed to realize that being just consistent in your own self is one of the key components of being successful, because you can't ride the roller coaster that goes with wins and losses. And who doesn't? I've never lost a game that I don't come home and I'm not like sitting there saying, oh, I'll just be consistent today. But it is an emotional roller coaster, and you can't get caught up in it. And you really have to stay in your moment. And as I advise kids on that all the time, being consistent in yourself is the first step as a coach. And I recognize that ups and downs are part of the game. And everybody needs their space. I need if I get home at 9 o'clock at night, I've got until 2 o'clock the next day to get over it. And then I've got to find a way to propel us to the next step and propel us forward and find something good we can take away from it. So I think the first thing that starts with being consistent as a coach and learning that, you are that key component.
We spend a lot of our off season trying to figure out who we are and what's important to us. And one of my favorite has been, I wrote it down, conflict. We looked up the word conflict. And if you look up synonym, that is really interesting. Competition is a synonym. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, do I want to compete? Competition and engagement. And then your antonym is stability and surrender. So naturally we're competitors and we see stability and surrender and we're like, we don't want to be that. However,
Right.
Now we have this word of competing and conflict. So we can start to dive into, well, what is conflict and is conflict healthy? A lot of times we shy away from those things because we assume it's not. So through my experience, and some of our best players they will do anything for the team. They're often just misunderstood. So if we can define what it looks like, and again, the team gives them permission to be themselves, all of a sudden the dynamic completely swings. So, here's a good example. Then we've done that, and really interesting, the percentage of our team, the most important character trait that they believed that they needed and other people needed was honesty. It was, I think, like 20% of them had honesty as number one, which again, this was a championship team. This was, they're competing in the top 10. So they're competing and they're asking for honesty. So I think with the eyes, as long as we're talking about what's important to us and the value they bring, then I actually love them, because I am not wonderful at feeding energy. So they do it and it's contagious. So we'll talk about what's important for our team to operate. And often they've stepped up to the occasion and they're the ones who are running our warmups, which again, I can help them with what to do. And then they're running and making it fun. And that's where, when you get the fun and the competitive, that's when I think you're really winning. And that's when you get that full engagement.
What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages of being a female coach coaching a women's sport?
Let's start with we'll get the disadvantage out of the way. I think the disadvantage is when they grow, when the players coming up through club and high school have only been coached by males, then that is how they see a coach. That they see that coaching comes from a male voice. That would be the disadvantage. I think the advantages of building authentic relationships without the awkwardness of the gender roles, of being able to connect. I think some of the coolest relationships in the world are female-female friendships. And it's not that I'm looking for a friendship. That's not the coach-player relationship, but it is female-female. And I think that's so empowering. I've always felt this: a connected group of women can accomplish anything.
Are scary. Right.
Yeah.
Are scary in terms of what they can do and what they'll commit to.
Yes. If you're lucky enough to coach a connected group of women, they'll go through the wall for you. That was that 17 team that Carly Snyder was on. Now, they were uber talented. Don't get me wrong. There's no substitute for talent. but they were so connected, and they were all on the same page in their friendships and their drive to help each other. I just really, and I don't say this to be facetious, I just had to get out of their way. Like just don't mess this up, Mary. This is one of those special teams. And if you don't screw it up, you're really going to enjoy this. And at least I'm so glad, Kath, that team came at this point in my career, because I don't know if I would have been smart enough to appreciate it.
Stay out of the
early
way.
on.
Yeah.
You're one of the few people that we've talked to, Nikki, that coach both men's groups and women's groups. Okay, so single gender, it's not like a swimming pool or a track where they're running around the same time and stuff, but you have one team and you have the other team. Are there differences?
Yes, not as much as people think. The men are more babies than the women are. They're needier and they need more affirmation. The women, of course, they need it, but there's a misconception that they're these big, strong 6'8", 6'6" guys that have all this bravado, and that's just not necessarily the case. They want your affirmation. They want to cry. They have emotions. They feel self-conscious. It's just the women are more apt to stating that than the guys are. It's a little more hidden. Besides obviously the physical differences, there's so much more common ground than people actually think. They're like, oh, these guys are, I'm like, they'll push you a little bit more. The girls won't try you as much. The guys will challenge you as an authority figure, challenge your knowledge. But if I come with enough confidence and say the sky is green, they're going to believe it. So it's a little differences.
And one of the questions we ask ourselves when we recruit players is like, do I want to see this kid for the next 4 years every morning I wake up?
Yeah.
And most of the time, if we offered, we said yes to that. And the answer was yes. But then that time comes and I don't see them. I see them in practice. So like I needed to carve out time to spend time with them. And like I said, like we're having fun doing that too. It's not like a chore. It's like just a fun thing to do. Like it's not in the office. It's like, hey, let's go grab a lunch. Let's have a coffee. Let's just sit down outside of a gym, catch some sun and talk,
So Sonia, what's really interesting is every one of our fabulous women that we've had the honor to talk to has said to be themselves, to be authentic. As easy as that sounds, it's quite a journey to really figure out how to do that when our model in our profession is men, because you really can't see how they did it and then think about, okay, there's a specific model that I can follow. So how have you found the joy of just being you and being authentic to you?
Okay, so this is where I think being a parent helped me a lot. And honestly, like being a single parent helped me because it's so when I think about society, it's like most homes, mom is the loving and caring one and dad is the enforcer. And that's not every household, but most homes, that's kind of how it works. So when they show up to play for a female coach, there's also usually a male assistant there somewhere. And so like when they come and play for us, it's like, okay, I'm supposed to be loving and caring, but in which I am, but I also say who travels. I put the lineup in, I'm a head coach. So now that transition, that shift that they've had like for 18 years of their life of a female being the shoulder to cry on and a male being the enforcer has to switch and has to change. And that's not always easy. And so for me, I think being the one that has to be both for Stella helps me. Like, I am the one who also is disciplinarian and like the enforcer and all that at the house. But like, I'm also, hey, that nobody loves you more than your mommy does, and just, having that balance and learning with her through her. I think it helped me just really, Carlette helped me with that stuff, just putting perspective that it's no different than parenting. Coaching is, like I didn't give birth to these kids, somebody else did, but I want to have relationships with them and I care about them. And so I'm doing this for your good, and I don't like putting Stella on timeout, it's just, I don't want to do that because she's unhappy, but I have to. I signed up to be a parent. I need to raise a good human. And same thing is with these girls. I signed up to raise leaders. I signed up to, make these girls into the best leaders that can possibly be out there. Not professional volleyball players. That's going to be like a nice little cherry on the top. But they need to get out there and rock the world, like, you know, kick butt, you know, as a young adults and adults later on in life. And that's what I see as my job.
So I'm not a parent, Taiba, but you and Carlette both are. And so can you give us an example? Can you raise children on this kind of a schedule where I'm available now and now I'm not available and then I'll be available later? How does that work?
Again, you know, my kids are at the age where they can understand a little bit now. And so they're 12 and 8, but we have started having this conversation with them when they were younger. There are times and there are events that mommy's going to miss, and, you know, maybe the first portion of season or during your class, but in the back half, the, you know, second semester, I'll be there for everything. I'll be there for your pickups and your drop-offs, and I'll be making lunch for you and breakfast, and, you know, really diving into making special moments where they know that I'm there and I'm present, and almost going a little bit overboard, so that those times when I'm away, it's, well, remember those good times and remember when I'm there, and you still have me when I come home. Like, we're still we make sure we have our dedicated, you know, we have our quiet time, or still the book in bed, whatever days that I'm home, but it's making sure that when I am there and I'm around them, that I'm present. And it's saying, I might need to go take a call for 20 minutes, but I'm going to come back to you. Or there is something important that I really have to go step aside for, but I will be back to you. And so they always know that it's like, oh, she's gone and I'm just kind of here and I'm by myself. It's mommy's always coming back.
Well, I'm a little bit ahead of you. My little women are almost 40, so 39, 38, and 22. So I can say it works. I mean, I don't know, maybe the therapy bills and things will be coming later. So maybe I don't know. I'm just going to claim it from my perspective. But what was really valuable for me is that they were on the journey with me. They were very engaged, and I was truthful about it. I mean, you know, there were times when I was like, I can't do this anymore. I really need your help. And I found that to be a huge gift for us now. As my little women are much older, I see that they live the same way that I modeled for them. Pretty much that's what they grew up. That's what they knew in their house. And most importantly, it brought me great joy. Like, I love what I do. So I made it intentional about do what you love, and we as a family will always support you. Versus if you're going to do it and we're all going to be miserable, we're definitely going to figure something else out, you know? So Kathy, that's one reason you and I are so intentional about this, is that we want women to have that ability to say, no, I want to go for this. Just how do I do it? And I found certainly it's a matter of sharing my heart and my truth and being able to say, I really want this. Will you help me? And now, you know, there's no better group than women to be like, you need something, we are on this. And I think so many times as women, we take ourselves out of that and pretend as if we don't need it. And, you know, I've got this. And boy, for me, the more I can get help and the more I can engage the people that are in my life, we then feel the joy of doing it together.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that, because I think it's about inviting them into the process. You know, my kids are welcome in my office. They're at school right now, but you know, if I'm on a Zoom call, it's not the panic, hey, I'm on a Zoom call, get away. It's, you know, come see what I'm doing real fast. And then, you know, I'll be there in 10 minutes. Or, you know, any position that I take, I make sure that they know that my kids are a priority as well, and that they will be in the gym, they will be next to me, and that I need to create a safe space for them as well. And so invite them into the process. And again, like I said, I think everyone has a little bit more joy when they feel their guard is let down and you can be comfortable with your surroundings.
How struggle creates success, because obviously there is no success, you know, without struggle, and there's really no growth without getting uncomfortable. And we live there, you know, in college athletics, in our program. I mean, we live like you know, what is it? The little bumper sticker, comfort, you know, success starts at the end of your comfort zone, right? And so, and certainly with a very high level women's basketball program, you know, you're getting uncomfortable every day, whether it be physically, you know, through your mental, emotional fitness. So I just think, you know, we teach, you know, there's no such thing as failure. You know, we're just figuring things out. And, you know, just everything's a learning opportunity, right? There's no mistakes, and not even just being at peace with failure, but really kind of embracing, the necessity of it in our program, which is hard. I mean, these young women, they're all high achievers. They don't embrace it right away. They fight it, and they lack self-compassion a lot of times, when they don't achieve what they wanted to achieve, and things don't come quite as easily maybe at this level as they always have.
Tanya, I want to ask about just the power of risk and making decisions. So starting with the risk and the decision of going to, work with Kathy in terms of, that $16,000 job. You were on the beach. I'm sure you were probably making a little more than 16,000. So whatever you were doing. And, you had the ability to really be for you in a way that you were like, this is worth it to me. Can you just take us through your thought process, or how to encourage other people to go for what they feel like is best for them?
Well, I really and truly thought at the time that it was the best way to get my foot in the door. Back then, a lot of people only had one assistant, and I thought it was very hard to get your foot in the door in collegiate coaching. And so I knew I was taking a risk by taking a pay cut. I mean, it was 50% pay cut basically. And I knew I was taking that risk, but I knew that the rewards later would be greater. And I just knew that if I ran into any difficulties or had any trouble with anything, I knew Fran would take care of me, because she promised she'd take care of me, and so I had that safety net. I'm not sure a lot of other people have a safety net like that. And that reassured me that taking that job was the right thing to do. And one of my college teammates was the other assistant. So to me, it felt like family. And it felt like the right thing to do, and it was a risk worth taking for me.
I think what I'd like to do is just unpack it at a macro level, and then go down to the micro level. At a macro level, I think what happens to coaches that struggle is we're so passionate about what we're doing, how we're doing it. It's a deeply personal industry where you lay your integrity on the line, your reputation, and your love for the game. And you learn very quickly that not everybody loves it. Not everybody has the same level of integrity. And you're also very vulnerable to being misunderstood. So at a macro level, if coaches could really sit back and just take a moment and think about themselves first. I always call it the 3 rings. The inner ring is yourself, and the awareness of how you enter into the sport as a participant, as a leader, and as a coach with your team. Number 2 is, how do you interact with your team, and what kind of conditions are you creating for today's athlete? And then number 3, and I think this is one where people don't talk enough about, and that is the idea of the game itself, the industry itself. I always believe the game is perfect, and we're the imperfect ones. So if the coach can first, I'll always try to be prefacing, what ring am I talking about? But I think most of our mistakes start in the inner ring, because once we realize earlier in our career that our team is just a cross-section of society, and this idea that everyone is going to be in alignment is a fallacy. And so when we talk about the stressors and the emotions and the conflict, if we could actually lower the standard with our team and say, hey, listen, as a head coach, if you could learn to say, hey, listen, I know we're not all on the same page. You have no idea how many players are going to exhale right there, because we have built in the coaching industry, we've built this narrative that is built on the model of championship programs, right? So people come, talk about championship programs, and we put out all the nice furniture, look at all the nice furniture in our house, and the stuff that's in the closet never gets talked about. And if we did a better job of saying, as championship programs and championship coaches, hey, there are days I am a clown car. I'm literally packing in everybody, and I don't really know where we're going on this day, whether we're loving each other or hating each other. So number 1, lower the standard on how perfect we all have to be. And that includes yourself. So as coaches today, if you want to manage that stress or that conflict and you want your players to be equally comfortable with it, you got to get in the clown car with them. You got to be in it with them. And they'll have a tendency to buy in more when you as the coach are saying, I'm right here with you in this conflict, whatever it is. It could be, once again, the ring, the player conflict with themselves, the player conflict with their teammates, the player conflict with their relationship with the game, because they come to you with different sets of relationships with the game based on their experience.
Confidence breeds winning. So, you get to a point that your team expects to win, and you've got to make sure you're fostering that. At the Division I, at the college level, recruiting is going to be key. So I think the diligence of continuing to work hard to continue to bring great players into your program. Flexibility, like we ran a 6-2 last spring. I don't philosophically love a 6-2, but I thought it was the best for our personnel. Being willing to adjust things and be creative. And, I think of the way I taught passing 19 years ago to how we teach it now. There's evolution to all of those things. But I think you can't ever be comfortable, right? So I think even when you have that year that you are so good, it's got to drive you to be better. And when you have those good years, if you work your tail off, it will advance your program because recruits are easier in theory to get. But we've also tried never to be a program that's locked into one player carrying all of our load.